The church was silent at dawn. Only the sound of a sparrow echoed faintly through the open window. Light filtered through the tall stained glass, painting the stone floor in soft patterns of red, blue, and gold. It was the kind of morning that felt timeless, the kind that wrapped itself around every corner of the small town. Inside, Father Michael stood at the altar. He was a man in his mid-40s, tall but gentle in posture. His robe, plain and unadorned, carried the weight of years of service. He pressed his hands together and bowed his head, whispering a prayer meant only for God. What he did not know was that a small camera, tucked away high near the ceiling, had been placed there weeks before. It was meant for security, nothing more. No one thought it would matter, because the church was considered safe, untouched by the troubles of the outside world. But cameras see what human eyes do not, and on that quiet morning, it recorded the priest in a moment no one expected. His voice trembled as he prayed, not for himself, but for the people who came here each week, carrying burdens they rarely spoke aloud. His words were low, soft, almost fragile. He asked for strength, for forgiveness, for peace. The camera kept watching. After the prayer, Father Michael sat down on the first pew. His shoulders slumped slightly, as though invisible weight pressed down on him. The golden morning light stretched across his face, revealing lines of fatigue that many never noticed. To his parish, he was strong, dependable, always ready with a kind word. But here, in this silent hour, his humanity showed. He let out a long breath and whispered words not meant for anyone but God. His tone was softer now, carrying both confession and plea. He spoke of doubt, of the heavy silence he sometimes felt when answers did not come quickly. He admitted that there were days he wondered if he was enough, days he felt small in the face of endless need. The hidden camera caught his face, caught the moment his hand rubbed over tired eyes. It was not scandal, not sin. It was something more subtle, vulnerability. The priest was not the unshakable figure people believed. He was human, uncertain, and yet still faithful enough to rise each morning and try again. Outside, the sparrows chirped louder, and a bell rang in the distance. He lifted his head at the sound, as if reminded of duty. Slowly, he stood, straightened his robe, and prepared to face the day. The camera stayed fixed on him, quiet and unblinking. As he walked back toward the altar, Father Michael paused. His gaze lingered on the wooden crucifix above him, but his mind wandered far away. A memory surfaced, clear and sharp, as if no years had passed. He saw himself as a younger man, sitting at a modest kitchen table. Across from him sat a boy, no older than 10, folding his hands just as he had taught. The boy's lips moved quietly, repeating words of prayer with careful effort. Father Michael remembered the warmth of that moment, the pride that filled him. That boy had been a neighbor's son, a child from a family burdened with hardship. His father drank too much. His mother often worked late. The boy found his way into Michael's company almost daily, seeking comfort in quiet talks and gentle lessons. Michael had been no priest then, only a man with faith and patience. The memory reminded him why he had chosen this path, why he had taken vows, given up comforts, and devoted himself to others. Not for recognition, not for praise, for small lives that needed steady hands, for hearts that needed someone to listen. The camera caught him smiling faintly at the memory. It was the smile of a man carrying both joy and loss, aware of the distance between who he had been and who he had become. From the main hall, Father Michael moved into a narrow side room. The walls were lined with shelves stacked with bags of rice, canned vegetables, and boxes of clothing neatly folded. This was the church's pantry, a place many in the town relied on, though they rarely spoke of it aloud. He knelt by a basket, carefully placing items inside: a loaf of bread, a small bag of apples, a tin of beans, each piece chosen with thought, as if he already knew the family who would need it. His movements were slow, deliberate. He did not rush the task, though he had done it countless times before. The hidden camera recorded his hands, rough and tired, yet precise. Few parishioners ever saw this side of him. On Sundays, they saw him in robes, guiding prayers, offering sermons. They did not see him here, stocking shelves late into the night, or packing baskets early in the morning. As he worked, he whispered a blessing over each basket. His words were simple, asking for warmth, safety, and health for whoever received it. His prayer was not dramatic, not loud. It was quiet, like a father tucking in a child. The basket filled slowly. He tied it closed with twine and set it aside, ready for delivery. Then he reached for another empty basket and began again. Father Michael pushed open the heavy wooden door of the church. The cool air touched his face, carrying with it the faint smell of rain from the night before. In his hands, he balanced the basket he had prepared. It was not heavy, but he held it carefully, as though its contents were precious. The narrow street outside was still quiet. A few shopkeepers swept their doorsteps, and an old man sat near the corner smoking a pipe. Michael nodded politely as he passed, his presence familiar in the neighborhood. People often waved to him, greeted him warmly, but today he walked with steady focus. The camera above the church's doorway followed his figure as he stepped out, the black robe swaying slightly with each step. It was not meant to track kindness, but it caught it anyway. He knew exactly where he was headed. A family 2 blocks away, struggling after the father lost his job. They had not asked for help, pride keeping them silent. But Michael had seen the worry in the mother's eyes after Mass. He knew the children had grown thinner in recent weeks. His pace was unhurried, calm, as though he carried not just food but dignity in that basket. To him, this was his true sermon, not the words spoken from the pulpit, but the quiet act of service done when no one was watching. The small house stood quiet at the corner of the street. Its paint had long faded, leaving dull patches of wood exposed. The curtains hung loosely, thin against the glass. Father Michael paused at the gate, the basket still in his hands. He did not rush to knock. Instead, he stood for a moment, as if gathering his thoughts. Delivering food was not difficult, but stepping into someone's private struggle always carried a weight. Pride, fear, and shame lived in these walls. He knew it well. Finally, he lifted his hand and tapped gently on the door. The sound was soft, respectful. He did not want to startle anyone inside. After a few moments, the door opened. A young mother appeared, her eyes tired but alert. She froze when she saw him, then glanced quickly at the basket. Michael offered a small smile. "For you," he said simply. He did not explain, did not preach. He only held it out, waiting. Her lips parted as if to refuse, but her eyes betrayed her relief. Slowly, she accepted the basket, her hands trembling slightly under its weight. She whispered thanks, her voice breaking. Michael nodded once, gently touched her shoulder, and stepped back. He gave her space, knowing dignity mattered as much as bread. From where he stood, Father Michael noticed 2 small faces peeking from behind their mother's skirt. A boy and a girl, no older than 7, pressed close together with wide eyes. They had been silent until now, but when the mother lowered the basket, their faces changed. Curiosity gave way to joy. The boy whispered something to his sister, and she giggled softly. Their eyes lingered on the loaf of bread visible under the cloth. Michael's chest tightened at the sight. Hunger was not always dramatic, not always loud. Sometimes it lived quietly in children's glances, in the way they studied food as if it were treasure. He bent slightly, enough for the children to see his face. He offered them a warm, gentle smile. They grinned back, shy but grateful. That exchange, small as it was, felt like a blessing returned. The mother's eyes filled with tears. She tried to speak, but no words came. Michael raised his hand in a quiet gesture, asking her not to strain herself. "Take care of them," he said softly, and she nodded, clutching the basket closer. With that, he stepped back onto the street. He did not linger, did not wait for more thanks. His work was to give, not to be recognized. The camera above the church could not follow here, but its earlier recording told the truth of his heart. By the time Father Michael turned back toward the church, the street had woken fully. Vendors pulled carts into place. Neighbors chatted near doorways. A dog barked in the distance as children ran past, their laughter bouncing off the stone walls. Michael walked calmly through it all. His hands were empty now, but his expression carried quiet peace. He returned greetings with small nods and gentle words, familiar to everyone in the neighborhood. They saw him as they always did, steady and present, though none knew what he had just done at the small corner house. The morning sun grew stronger, spreading warmth across the cobblestones. A few townspeople bowed their heads slightly as he passed, not out of formality, but respect. He smiled in return, though he felt no pride. To him, these moments were part of a rhythm: prayer, service, community, and solitude. The work of a priest was not only in sermons or ceremonies, it was in carrying baskets, listening to whispers, offering comfort where silence lived. As he reached the church, he paused once more at the doorway, his eyes lifted to the cross carved above it. For a moment, he closed his eyes, as if giving thanks not for himself, but for the chance to serve again today. Then he stepped inside, back into the stillness of the sacred hall. Inside the church again, Father Michael returned to the pantry. The shelves stood waiting, filled with items collected from donations and careful purchases. He rolled up his sleeves and reached for another basket. Asterisk this time, he hummed softly as he worked. The hymn was old, one he had sung since boyhood. Its tune was steady, simple, carrying no grandeur. It filled the small room gently, like sunlight slipping under a door. Asterisk, he placed another loaf of bread, another tin, another bag of fruit. His hands moved with practiced ease, though fatigue crept at the edges of his expression. The camera, still unseen by him, caught the small signs of strain, the way he paused to stretch his back, the faint sigh when his shoulders ached. Yet he did not stop. Service had become his rhythm, his answer to doubt. Each basket was more than food. It was a quiet declaration that kindness still mattered, that hope could still fit in small places. When he finished, he set the basket aside, then wiped his hands on a cloth. He glanced toward the window, where light now streamed in stronger. He whispered another prayer, his voice steady this time, not for himself, but for strength to continue this work until evening came. Asterisk, when his work in the pantry paused, Father Michael returned to the main hall. The silence there welcomed him, wrapping around his weary frame. He walked slowly toward the altar and lowered himself to his knees once more. The stained glass shone brighter now, alive with morning sunlight. Patterns of red and blue stretched across the floor, bathing his robe in soft color. He lifted his hands slightly, palms open, and whispered words no one else could hear. Asterisk, his prayer was not long, not formal. It was simple, born of habit and sincerity. He asked for courage to face what the day still held. He asked for comfort for those who suffered quietly behind closed doors. He asked for forgiveness for the times he doubted, for the moments he wondered if it all mattered. The camera recorded his stillness, the gentle rise and fall of his shoulders, the faint movement of his lips. It captured the contrast between the image people carried of their priest and the reality of a man who still wrestled with questions. Asterisk, and yet, in his prayer, there was peace, a fragile, steady peace that carried him through. He opened his eyes, looked once more at the cross, and drew a deep breath. The day was only beginning, and he would meet it step by step. Later that morning, Father Michael left the church again, this time carrying no basket. He walked with quiet steps toward the small town hospital. Its white walls stood plain, its halls echoing with faint sounds of coughing and hurried footsteps. He entered a dim room where an elderly man lay in bed, his body frail beneath thin blankets. The man's hand shook as he reached out, and Michael took it gently, steadying the tremor with his own warm grasp. They spoke little. The man's voice was weak, fading between pauses. Mostly, Michael listened. He leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the man's, nodding softly at each word. To the outside world, it might have looked like nothing, just silence broken by a few whispers. But here, in this quiet corner, it meant everything. Asterisk, the man's eyes grew wet. His fears spilled out slowly, of pain, of leaving loved ones behind, of facing the unknown. Michael's hand did not let go. His voice was calm when he finally spoke, not promising miracles, but promising presence. "You are not alone," he said, and the man's breathing eased. The hidden camera in the church could not see him here, yet his actions matched what it had already shown. A priest whose strength was not in grand ords, but in gentle company. The hospital visit left Father Michael quiet, but not heavy. He stepped into the afternoon sun, his black robe brushing against the cobblestones as he made his way back toward the church. Asterisk, the town had grown busier. Market stalls filled the square with bright cloth and the smell of roasted bread. Children darted between the crowds, their laughter ringing clear. One boy nearly collided with Michael before skidding to a halt. He looked up, startled, then grinned shyly before running off again. Michael smiled faintly, his eyes following the children for a moment. Their energy, their joy, was a reminder that life continued in all its forms, even alongside suffering. He carried that thought with him as he walked, the faint sound of bells in the distance marking the passing hours. Asterisk neighbors greeted him warmly, and he returned each word with patience. Some asked small questions, others only nodded. He never rushed. Each exchange mattered, even if brief. The hidden camera back in the church still waited, still watching silently. It would record his return, showing the same calm figure stepping once more through the tall wooden doors. But it could never fully capture what filled his heart in these moments, the balance of sorrow and hope, woven together as he walked among his people. When Father Michael returned, the church was empty once more. Afternoon light poured through the stained glass windows, softer now, more golden. He moved toward the altar and reached for the row of unlit candles. With careful hands, he struck a match and touched the flame to the first wick. A small fire sparked to life, then another, and another, until a line of candles flickered gently, their light dancing against the stone walls. He stood for a moment, watching them. Each candle represented someone's prayer, someone's longing, some lit for health, some for forgiveness, others for peace. Michael bowed his head, honoring each one silently. The camera captured the glow of the candles reflecting across his face, highlighting his calm expression. His lips moved again, speaking prayers not for himself, but for those who had entrusted their hopes here. He prayed for the mother who feared tomorrow's hunger, for the children who dreamed of brighter days, for the elderly man in the hospital, whose hands still trembled in memory. His voice was soft, but steady. As the flame swayed, the church filled with warmth that was not from sunlight alone. It was the warmth of intention, of compassion poured quietly into the room. Michael drew a long breath, then lowered himself once more to his knees before the altar. Evening began to draw near, and Father Michael moved to the rectory, the modest living quarters attached to the church. His desk was small, its surface worn from years of use. Papers lay scattered across it, some bills, some notes, and several letters written in uneven handwriting. These letters were from his parishioners. Some asked for advice, others confessed burdens they could not speak aloud. Michael picked one up, reading slowly. It was from a young man struggling with anger, afraid he might drive away those he loved. Michael set the letter down, reached for his pen, and began to write a reply. His words were careful, not heavy with doctrine, but with kindness. He reminded the man that struggle did not erase worth, that effort mattered even when progress was slow. His hand moved steadily, each sentence shaped with patience. The camera did not see this moment, yet it reflected the same truth as the rest. His service was not about standing above others, but sitting with them in their quiet places, whether through words, baskets, or simple presence. When he finished writing, he folded the letter neatly and placed it aside. He leaned back for a moment, rubbing his temples. Outside, the first sounds of night stirred, and the air cooled against the stone walls. Darkness settled over the town. The market closed, the laughter faded, and the streets grew quiet again. Inside the church, only one candle still burned, its flame steady against the growing shadows. Father Michael stood before the altar. His robe looked darker now in the dim light, his figure outlined by the soft glow. He closed his eyes, folding his hands in prayer for the last time that day. His words were slow, deliberate. He gave thanks for the strength to serve. He prayed for those he had met, the mother and her children, the elderly man in the hospital, the neighbors in the street. He asked again for peace, not only for them, but for himself, so he could continue the work tomorrow. The hidden camera, high in its corner, recorded the moment. It had seen him pray, seen him labor, seen him give quietly without expecting return. What it captured was not scandal, but humanity. A priest who doubted, who grew weary, but who still chose kindness again and again. The flame flickered as he whispered his final amen. Then he rose slowly, his shadow stretching long across the stone floor. He blew out the candle, leaving the church in gentle darkness. The day was over. Tomorrow would come, and he would begin again.